Welcome back to Learning with Merit. Today we are covering the Windows file system using a graphical user interface or a GUI. Covered in this video, we're going to look at what is a file system, accessing the File Explorer settings, the root directory folders, user directory folders and files, creating, reading, updating, and deleting files and folders. The first thing we need to know if we're going to understand what a file system is we need to know what a file is. So let's take a look at what a file is. A file is a collection of data that is stored on a computer storage device. So files can contain any type of data, including text, images, videos, music, and programs. Files are identified by their file name, which is a unique name that is assigned to the file when it is created. They are organized into folders, which are directories that can contain other files and other folders. A file extension is a suffix that is added to the end of the file name to indicate the type of a file, and it is typically separated from the rest of the file name by a period. Now, a file system is a component of the kernel that manages how data is organized and stored on storage devices. NTFS is the default for Windows, ext4 is the default for Linux, and the APFS is the default for Mac OS. Other common systems you may see are FAT, FAT32, and exFAT. These are commonly seen on things like USB keys. Let's talk about how to access the File Explorer. If you look down here at the bottom, you have your taskbar, and there is a folder. If you double click on it, you can access the File Explorer from there. You can also come to the search bar here and type in File. You'll probably have File Explorer pop up very quickly there. You can come down to the Windows tile, which is our little start button down here. You can right click on it. You can click on File Explorer. That's another way that you can find it. You can also hit the Windows key and R, and if you type the word Explorer into it, it will bring up the File Explorer that way. So these are all the ways that we can access the File Explorer. Next, let's look at the settings that we can find in File Explorer. So here we have an open File Explorer window, and there are lots of things that we can see. We have a little panel over here. We have some frequent folders that it takes us to. You'll see recent files down here, and even some little preview type things over here. But if we look up here at the top, we have several tabs. We have the File tab, we have the Home tab, Share, and View. And we're going to look at each of these. But let's start actually at the top because we have some little hidden things that most people may not notice. If we look at this little Customize Quick Access toolbar, there are some things we can do. We can add Undo, we can add Redo, we can add Delete, we can add Rename, we can even have it show it below the ribbon, which means down here where it's a little easier for us to access. So we have all these different little options. And if I go into a folder, for example, here we have the desktop, I have the ability to do a couple of things. Like I can check the properties, I can look at a new folder here, I can undo, redo, delete, all the things we just talked about. And I can customize which of those shows up based on which I use the most. So we're going to click back to show above the ribbon, and we're going to leave all of that up there so we have all of the possible options. Now, if we look at File here, we have some things we can do. We could open a new window. We can open Windows PowerShell, and that'll take us to the place that we're at in the file system. We can change the folder and search options. We can also look for some help stuff, and we can close that file. Just like that. And that takes us all the way out of File Explorer. So here, let's look at Home now. We have Pin to Quick Access, Copy, and Paste. But you'll see this, most of this stuff right here is grayed out right now. So we need to go into a folder that we can do something with. So I'm going to click probably on Desktop since it has some files on it already. Click on Home, and maybe click on one of the files here. Let's see if it'll let me click on one of the files. Okay, so we still can't do that much with what we've got here, so I'm going to create a new text file. And there's a new text file now, so if I click on that, I go to Home. Okay, we've got a few more options now. So there's Pin to Quick Access, which will take it and pin it over here on the navigation pane and allow us to get to it quickly if we want to. We also have Copy, which allows us to copy, Paste, which allows us to paste. We have Cut, Copy Path, which is very useful. We'll talk about that later. The path specifically has to do with the location in the file system that we're at, and being able to copy the path is very useful sometimes. There's also Paste Shortcut, so we can paste a shortcut if we need to as well. We have move to if we want to move it to a specific location, copy to if we want to copy it to a specific location. We can delete, rename, create a new folder. I'll do that real quick. That was very simple to create a new folder there. Of course, I can rename it if I want to. There's new item, so I can I can click on the drop down arrow there, and there are a couple different things we can create, including a folder, a shortcut, and a bitmap image, a compressed folder, a couple different types of text documents. We have easy access, so there are a couple of things we can do here. Don't find me using them quite often, but they are there in case we need them. Again, we can look at properties of the file if we need to. We can open, edit, look at the history of the file. Select all, we'll select everything. Select none, we'll unselect all of that stuff. And then we have invert selection. So if I wanted to select everything but this folder, I could go to home and invert selection, and it will select everything but that last folder that I clicked on. It's a very useful little tool. So that's everything in the home set of settings. If we go to share, there's some other things we can do here. We have zip. Zip will create what we call an archive file. Basically, it takes the files that we want, it packages them, and it compresses them by removing some of the data. And it's okay. It's still gonna have all the data we need it whenever we send it to somebody else. Because they will unzip it. And it's basically a process of removing data to make it smaller, and then adding that data back once it gets where it's going. And if you're interested more in zip files, of course, you can look up on the internet how zip files work. But that's the gist of them. We have burn to disk, which is less and less a thing these days as we start to move away from using CDs and things like that. There is print, fax, email, share. You can remove access from certain people here if you want to. You can also specify who gets access on your computer. This can be good for security purposes. Now, perhaps the most important one, in my opinion, for beginners who are used to the default way things are set up. We have the view pane. Here's where we can kind of customize what we see in our file explorer, and this can be very useful. So we have the navigation pane, which is this thing over here. If I click on that and I uncheck navigation pane, you'll see that it goes away. We're just looking at the files inside of our folder here. If I go back to that and I add it back, I can come back over here. We've got expand to open folders, show all folders, show libraries. And we can check those as we need those. It will show all of the folders that we're looking at currently. We can, of course, show libraries. Libraries are just special types of folders. But for now, we're going to leave that as the default, and you can play around with that as you see fit to your liking. We have preview pane. That's going to be this thing over here. That allows us to see inside of the file. So if I have a text document here and I write, this is some text, and I save that and close it, you'll see that over here in the preview pane, we have this is some text whenever I have highlighted new text document. Let's say I don't want that. I can click it and it's gone. I can again go to details pane. Details pane will give us a little bit more information on the file. So I can have the preview or the details pane, but I cannot have both. But it will give us a little bit more information on what's going on there. I'll go ahead and leave it on preview for now because that seems to be the default. You can change the size of the icons you're looking at. You can see details if you want. You can see based on content if you want. You can have just a list. You can have tiles. You can have small icons, extra large icons, large icons. It's really just up to your preference. Whatever you like. Most people will leave it here at details, but sometimes it's nice, for example, if you're looking at pictures, to have maybe medium to large icons in the folder, as opposed to just a list of the file name. It can be very difficult if they have a bunch of default names. And you can scroll through this if you have more options and that sort of thing, but we'll leave it on details for now. Here we have group by, so if we want to sort them, we can sort by different pieces here, like the name, when it was last modified. We can choose our columns, that sort of thing. We have add columns, so this is if we want to add more, so date created. Basically, we're just adding more information every time. Authors. And you'll see that it becomes kind of difficult as things get larger to keep all of that on there. So I'm going to go back to view. I'm going to get rid of the navigation pane. I'm going to go back to view. I'm going to get rid of the preview pane. And you'll see we're adding more here. So I go to add columns, tags. You see now tags is on there. And you can rearrange these columns. So if you like date created first, or date modified, or type, you can totally rearrange these columns to your liking. And then we can size all columns to fit. So if we want one column, if we don't want all the columns stretched out, so if they seem stretched out, we can size them so that they fit the correct size, and it will automatically do that for us. Now, one of the most important things we need to do as people who actually want to use the computer effectively is check these 3 boxes. And that is for a couple of reasons. One of which is that there are hidden files that we won't see by default. It is also good to see file name extensions, not just for knowing what the file extension is, but for security, in the sense that there are some times where people will hide the extension of a file by giving it 2 extensions. They'll do dot something and then dot something else, and then it's hidden and you don't see the actual extension of the file. So let's click on item checkboxes so that it's easier to check these. Let's click on file name extensions so we can start seeing the extensions of those files. Let me make this just a little bit bigger. You'll see that new text document now has .txt after it to indicate it's a text document. And then we'll add hidden files there as well. And you'll see, of course, it's updating over here because I'm messing around with my desktop. If I go back to this PC, all right, we'll see some other things going on. But we have a general understanding of all of the settings that we need now. We have hide selected items if we want, and then we have a few more options that we can do. Change folder and search options if you want to go and look through those. We have, open each folder, all of these different things. You can look through them and change them as you want. Like, I don't personally like quick access, so I like to go straight to this PC, so I might change it there. We've got view what we want to see. So it says don't show hidden files, folders, or drives. We can change that. We can change all of these different little settings. You just have to sort of look through them and see what you like and edit them there. And then you can look at how your search works and edit that there as well. So these are all of our options, everything that we have in File Explorer and all the different things that we can do. I'm going to set it back to have the regular navigation pane over there, and I'm going to set it back to have the preview pane over on the right, just so that everybody's comfortable with what they're looking at for the next little piece. So let's take a look at the root directory, or C:, here. On our computer, we have to have something that stores all of our files. We call this our storage. There are several different types of storage. One of them is a hard disk drive, an HDD. Another one might be an SSD, or a solid state drive. SSDs are newer than hard disk drives, but we still use both very commonly today. SSDs will typically be used for storing your operating system now. But in general, on Windows, you will always see this is our default sort of view. Down here we have devices and drives, and we see something that says local disk C. Now, local disk C, with a little colon right there, is the hard drive for this computer. So it stores all of the folders and files. If you see other drives on here, that's perfectly okay. There may be other drives connected to your device, but by default, okay, the drive that holds all of the operating system files and everything like that will be called local disk C, and it will be right here, very easy for you to find. So let's go ahead and click on that because I want to see what's inside of that hard drive. If I click there, it takes me here. Now let's see what we're looking at here. We have several different things inside of this particular folder. We call this right here the root directory. So you'll see up here at the top, we have a path, and that path says C:/. All right, C: indicates the drive that we're in, and then the backslash part helps us know what we're actually looking at. So we're in the root directory. We're in the top folder, the folder that contains all other folders. So if we look at here, we have several things. We have something that's like $ win reagent. We've got perf logs. We've got program files, x86, program data, users, Windows. What are all these? And what are we actually looking at? Well, in a minute, I'm going to take you through all of these and describe what all of them do and what they're for. But for right now, let's just explore a little bit and see what we have. So if I come down here and I look at program files, I can look inside that and we'll see program files from different things. In program files x86, we'll see something very similar. In program data, we will see, again, something similar there. We have several different folders inside of that folder. We have users. And the cool thing here, you'll see Learning with Merit. And that's my user folder. So that is the name of my user on this computer. And we have some other users. We have a default user and we have a public user here. And we're going to ignore those for now. We're going to focus just on my user here. Now, if you are looking at yours, you'll see a different. You may even see multiple users here, but you're looking for your username folder whenever we look at it. We also have Windows. Windows is going to store all of the stuff for, that's right, you guessed it, Windows. There's a lot of stuff on here. One really important folder is the System32 folder. This is where we store all the stuff for the administrator of the device. So you can actually operate as a System32 user. And that'll come up later whenever you're operating as the administrator of a computer. So let's go back here. And you'll see, by the way, that the path up here is changing. If I click on this, okay, and I go to users, and I click on it again, look, now I'm in C:\users. So this up here is the file path. This is where I am at in the computer. So if I go to Learning with Merit now, you'll see that my file path has changed once again. Now I'm C:\users/Learning with Merit. And inside Learning with Merit, we have quite a few things. In fact, you're probably familiar with several of these. For example, 3D objects, contacts, desktop, documents, downloads. Those are ones we're probably familiar with. If you've used Windows at all, you've probably messed around with desktop, documents, downloads, maybe music, maybe pictures. Okay, we've also got saved games, searches, videos, ntuser.dat. We've got a lot of different things going on here. But there are a couple things we're more focused on than others. You'll notice that this is common for all users. If you look at somebody else's computer, they'll have a lot of these same files. There may be some files that you have that they don't have, that they have that you don't have. And it primarily has to do with the types of things that you download on your computer or what you're using. For example, I have .vs Code. You may not have .vs Code on there. The reason is because of this program right here, which is called Visual Studio Code. This contains some information on Visual Studio Code for my user on this device. And again, you'll see up there, the path is changing. Users, Learning with Merit, .vs Code. So I want to go back to Learning with Merit. I can click right there. I can also click back. We can click on desktop and look, you'll see there's all my desktop files. Documents, of course, there's nothing in here. Downloads, anything that I've downloaded, which I don't have anything downloaded at the moment. But we can look at all of these folders. And this is sort of how we navigate. We have a path up here to tell us where we're at and who we're looking at. I could go back to users. Let's see what public has in it. Oh, there's a public desktop, a public documents, public downloads. Very interesting to look at. We can also look at default. What do we got in default? Oh, there's a desktop for the default, documents, downloads. So you'll see that some of these things are very similar, and you can even look through some of the folders and files depending on the permissions that you have. But remember, the root directory is the directory that contains all other folders and files. I start here and I can find everything from there. Then we have, under users, we have our username directory, which is always going to be the name of your user. Double click on that, and this is where all of your folders and files are kept. Now that we've seen some folders and file paths, let's actually talk a little bit more about what that is. So if we look at this, a file path is a string of characters that identifies the location of a file on a computer storage device. They are composed of drive letter, volume separator, a directory structure separated by backslashes or forward slashes depending, and then a file name. There's a good example of it with my documents. Windows file paths can be absolute or relative. An absolute path starts at the root directory and takes you all the way to the file you're looking at. A relative path uses a dot in order to indicate the working directory or the current directory that you are in. There are some examples of absolute file paths and then a few examples of a relative file path that you might see. The double dot indicates going back a directory. So tips for working with these Windows file paths: make sure you use backslashes to separate the directory components. We're going to enclose those file paths in double quotes if they contain spaces. If we're going to use a relative path, we need to start the file with a period to indicate the working directory. Now, the little program here is going to go through and describe some of the most common folders that you may see in that top level directory or the root directory, including some of the folders that you see in your user directory. All right, so now that we know where our root directory is, and we know that it is located on our C drive here, and it is the folder that contains all other folders, and you might be asking yourself, how do I create files and folders in order to get something done? How do I create them, move them around, do all the things I need to do with them? And we call this create, read, update, and delete. And it has a lot to do with databases, in fact, and sort of stole the acronym from that. But the acronym is CRUD, or CRUD, perhaps my favorite acronym in computer science. But we are going to create, read, update, and delete files. So let's go and find a nice place to do this. So we can really create it anywhere that we have access as a user, and if we're not an administrator, we can't just create files wherever. If we try to come up here and create files in this directory, for example, the root directory, it may not let us because we are not the user who is the administrator. Now in this particular case, my user happens to be an administrator, but if you were to try to put a file in here and you were not, it would result in some sort of issue. So let's find our user folder and go to Learning with Merit here. And we can come down, let's go to Documents because that's where most people would probably put their files. So we're going to go into Documents, and here we have a blank canvas to work with. There's nothing in here. Let's go ahead and make a file. So let's right click, and if we come down, we can go to New, and let's just make a text document. So we'll make a text document, and we'll call this text document File 1. Let's say that I want to add something to this text document. I could double click on it, and whatever the default program is to open up files will open. In this case, it's Notepad. You can actually change that in settings if you wanted to use something else, but Notepad is the default. So we're going to say this is some text, just so we have it right there. I'm going to hit Control S to save, and then Control W to just exit out without having to use my keyboard or my mouse, excuse me. Let's say that we want to copy this. I can right click, go down here to copy, and then right click again and paste it where I want it to go. In this case, we happen to be in the same directory or same folder. Directories and folders are the same thing, keep that in mind. I could also click on it, hit Control C and Control V. Then I can just keep hitting Control V here a couple times to make several files. Again, you'll see they all end in .txt because they are text files. But oops, I created way too many file ones, and I need to get rid of a few of them. So I'm going to come up here and click on this first one, right click on it, and I'm going to find delete. Delete's the easiest way to get rid of it, so I'm going to click delete, and it's gone. It's not totally gone, but it is gone. It's actually moved to the recycle bin. I'll click on this one. The other way we can get rid of it is there's a delete key on your keyboard. You hit that, and it goes away as well. So that's how we can get rid of files. Let's see what else we can do with them. Let's say I wanted to move this file to my desktop. There are several things I could do. I could right click on it. I could cut it from here and then move it to the desktop. I can also click on it and hit Control X, and that will cut. I could also click on it here, and if we go, I believe it's in Home, we have Move To, and we can move it to a different folder that way. Oop, there's Desktop. I'll click right there, and it's been moved to the desktop. So those are 3 different ways that you could do that. If we wanted to do it with the Control X method or the cut method, I could do that there. Then I need to go to desktop. I could go over here to desktop, and I could paste just like that, and you'll see that it has been successfully moved. And the last thing that I don't recommend that you get in the habit of, but can be very useful if you want, is you could just click and drag. So if you can see it over here in the navigation pane, you can click, and you should be able to just click and drag that file right there to the desktop, and boom, it's been moved. You can also do the same thing if you're wanting to move it to the desktop from here. You can click and drag it that way. If you can get a good hold on it, there we go, click and drag. It'll ask you to move to the desktop, and you move it to the desktop that way. Now let's say that we want to update something about these files. So I can double click on it to update it, or I can right click and click rename and give it a new name. It's as simple as that right there. I can look at things like the properties if I want to. There's also several different options here. We're not going to go through everything, but we have rename, delete, cut, copy, all of those sorts of things there. Now let's say that I need a folder. Several of these files need to sort of be collected together in a group, and I need a folder. I can do a couple of things. I can come up here and I can use the new folder button and create a new folder that way. I can right click, come down to new, and go to folder and create a new folder that way. So two pretty simple ways that we can create a folder here, and then I can use any of the methods that I just showed you to move these files. So like we could click on those three and move them into that folder, double click on that folder, and there we are in that folder with those files. If we've decided that all of our stuff is not the way we wanted it, we can highlight all of that right there and we can hit delete, and we've gotten rid of all of those files. Now, one last thing I want to cover when we talk about create, read, update, and delete files, specifically delete. You may think that these files are gone forever, but in fact they are not. In fact, they've just been moved to the recycle bin. Here's all the things that we just deleted. File 1, all of those that got deleted, all of the folders that got deleted, it's all been moved to the recycle bin. So your files are not actually deleted whenever you delete them. They are moved to the recycle bin. Now what you can do is you can actually move them from the recycle bin here, and we can empty the recycle bin like this. And I'll ask you, are you sure you want to? You can say yes, and then you'll see that now those files are actually gone. And you may be sitting there thinking, now my files are deleted, but even that's not actually true. All we've actually done at this point is removed the pointer that points to those files in the file system, and you no longer see it. But on your actual hard drive, nothing has been overwritten yet. Until we actually overwrite the place on the hard drive where that file was stored, that file is still there. Now the good news is in newer drives that we have like SSDs, there are actually tools that go in and overwrite those areas every so often. I think it may be once a week, but it does actually overwrite those areas every so often. But you need to be very careful and remember that when you delete something off the computer, it is not actually deleted until it is overwritten with new information, even if you empty it from the recycle bin. It is actually not completely gone until it is overwritten with new information.